The night was alive with noise, but not the kind that comforted. Not the hum of crickets, nor the gentle whispers of wind threading through olive trees. No, tonight the air split with shouts, with chains clattering against stone, with voices raised in hunger and greed. Torches spat sparks into the heavy dark as men jostled for a better view, their hands greasy with wine and coin. The marketplace had turned into an arena, a stage where the condemned were paraded like beasts, stripped of dignity and left to rot beneath the jeers of their captors. And there, bound in iron shackles that cut into his wrists, stood the Alpha King. He was not the proud figure sung of in ballads, not the towering predator who once commanded entire armies of wolves. He was bent, bloodied, his body wrecked by days of captivity and nights of torment. His head hung low, strands of dark hair matted with sweat and blood, his breath shallow but defiant. Yet even in ruin, there was something unbroken about him. His presence clung to the space like fire clings to ash. Merchants shouted their bids. One offered silver. Another, grain and land. A third waved a purse heavy with Roman coin. The crowd leaned in, drawn by the spectacle of power undone, the spectacle of watching a king sold like cattle. And just when the gavel was about to fall, just when the final price was about to be claimed, a single voice cut through the din. Hers. Her voice shook, not with weakness, but with resolve. Small, fierce, trembling with the edge of desperation. She stepped forward, a figure too plain to belong among lords, too poor to carry anything of value. Yet in her hands was a pouch, her last pouch. Every coin she had scraped, begged, and stolen to survive now lay within it. Her heart pounded as she raised it high, offering everything she possessed for the life of the broken Alpha. The crowd laughed. A murmur spread like wildfire, the foolish girl, the outcast healer, daring to buy what kings could not. The auctioneer sneered, but coin was coin, and her hand did not shake as she poured every piece into his palm. The gavel fell. And in that moment, she became a traitor. When she pressed her hands against the Alpha's wounds, when her lips moved in whispered prayers that his heart would not give out before dawn, she sealed her fate. Her sacrifice was no longer hidden, it was rebellion carved into fire. By saving him, she had spat in the face of the order, of the tradition that demanded his death. And the world would not forgive her for it. The hunt began at once. Through the alleys of the Forum she ran, her breath ripping her lungs raw. Behind her came the clatter of armored feet, the thunder of men who saw her not as a woman but as prey. She clutched the Alpha to her side, his weight staggering her, his body burning with fever. Every step jarred his wounds, but she refused to let go. The night closed around her, thick with smoke and torchlight, and still she ran. The storm broke over the mountains without warning. Rain came first, in sheets so heavy it blurred the world into streaks of fire and shadow. Then thunder cracked the heavens open, a roar that rattled her bones and masked the sound of her pursuers. Lightning slashed across the sky, white and merciless, and for a heartbeat it illuminated everything, the broken walls of the city behind her, the black outline of forests ahead, the Alpha's pale face leaning against her shoulder, his lips parted in unconscious pain. Her legs trembled. Her lungs screamed. She was not built for this, no soldier, no warrior, only a healer who had lived her life in exile. And yet something deeper than flesh carried her forward, something raw and unyielding. Fear clawed at her ribs, but so did a strange, rising strength, as though every step she took pulled her closer to the truth of who she was meant to be. She stumbled through the ruins of an abandoned Roman villa. Broken columns jutted like teeth from the earth, walls crumbled and eaten by ivy. She fell to her knees inside what remained of a courtyard, the Alpha collapsing beside her. His chest rose faintly, his breath ragged but alive. Her hands, trembling but determined, pressed to his wounds, feeling heat pulse against her palms. "Not yet," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You don't die here. Not like this. Not while I still breathe." Her words were swallowed by the storm, but something in the air shifted. The earth seemed to hold its breath, as if the world itself leaned closer to listen. From the distance came the sound that froze her blood. Wolves. Their howls rose above the storm, eerie and layered, neither holy beast nor holy man. They were hunting her now, the soldiers of the order, the enforcers of the ancient tradition she had just defied. Each howl was a vow, each echo a promise that they would find her, tear her apart, and drag the Alpha back into chains. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. Fear churned in her stomach, but beneath it, deeper still, something else stirred. It was faint, fragile, but real. A spark she had carried since the day she was cast out, a spark she had buried beneath shame and silence. Now, pressed between life and death, it whispered again. Not prey. Not victim. Not powerless. The silver flame. It shimmered beneath her skin, pulsing faintly in her veins. She clenched her fists, willing it to stay hidden, terrified of what it might unleash. But she knew, sooner or later, it would come. And when it did, the world would burn. She lifted her gaze to the Alpha, his face carved in shadow and lightning. Even broken, even bleeding, he looked untouchable, dangerous. A man forged of storms and silence. And yet, she had seen his fragility, the cracks in his armor. She had seen him fall. She had chosen him anyway. The night closed in tighter, wolves circling closer with every heartbeat. The ruins around her whispered of old gods, of battles fought and lost, of destinies carved in blood. She pressed her forehead to the Alpha's, her tears mingling with the rain. If this is the end, she murmured, then let it be for something that mattered. Lightning split the sky once more, illuminating her trembling frame, the Alpha's battered body, and the shadows of predators drawing nearer. This was how her story began, not with safety, not with comfort, but with fire, with sacrifice, with the weight of a choice that could not be undone. And for those listening, for those whose hearts beat faster now, caught in the storm with her, this is only the first breath. If your heart races with hers, if you want to see how far love can go against fate itself, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Because this is just the beginning. The ruins groaned with the weight of storm and silence, their broken arches bending like the spines of fallen gods. The fire in the girl's palms dimmed to embers as exhaustion claimed her. Her breath came shallow, her vision blurring with rain. She thought she had bought him life, perhaps a moment of mercy, but not this presence, this force stirring awake beside her. At first it was a tremor, a low vibration beneath her hand where it pressed to his chest. Then, slowly, like the earth deciding to shake free from centuries of slumber, his body stiffened. Muscles flexed beneath torn skin. His eyes, closed and heavy, twitched. His lips parted as if tasting air after drowning. And then his eyes opened. Not dim, not clouded with weakness as she had expected, but sharp, startling, alive. Golden fire in the midst of storm. Even wounded, even half-dead, those eyes carried the weight of command. She froze beneath them, heart skittering as though the storm had shifted its gaze upon her. His voice was rough, scraped raw from chains and silence, but it cut clean through the ruin. You. Just a word, but enough to pin her in place. She had no reason to answer, yet she felt as though he had summoned her from the marrow of her bones. She tried to steady her breath. You need to rest. But his gaze didn't soften. He lifted his head slightly, pain sharpening the angle of his jaw, and said something that rooted her where she knelt. I know your name. Her throat closed. The storm held through the villa's broken roof, but all she could hear was the echo of his voice wrapping itself around her in ways it should not. She shook her head, refusing, denying, whispering, that's impossible. We've never met. Yet he didn't look uncertain. He studied her face with the quiet ferocity of a man who had held her image in darkness, who had fought to remember it even as the world tried to strip it from him. You were in my dreams. 4 years. I thought you were a lie the fever left behind. His eyes flicked to her trembling hands, the faint glow still shimmering at her fingertips. But you're not a lie. Her chest tightened, torn between fury and something dangerously close to hope. Dreams don't mean anything. He gave a broken laugh, jagged as shattered stone. For me, they mean survival. I saw you long before tonight. A girl who would spend her last coin to buy a dying king. I knew your eyes. Your fire. I knew you would come. The words clawed at her, too heavy, too raw. She turned away, staring at the rain coursing down the ivy-stained walls, refusing to let him see how much his voice unsettled her. I didn't come for destiny. I came because no one deserves to die chained like an animal. His silence pressed against her back, the kind that carried judgment. Then, so you do not deny it, you came for me. Heat flared in her chest. She wanted to argue, to push his words back into the storm, but the truth lodged like a thorn she couldn't dislodge. She had come for him, though she couldn't explain why. He shifted, forcing his broken body upright with a strength that shouldn't have been possible. His breath hitched, but his presence filled the ruined courtyard. Even slumped against the wall, blood trickling down his arm, he was intimidating, too large for the shadows, too dangerous for the silence. Why? His voice cut again, low and demanding. Why risk your life? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. And yet you gave everything. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She tried to find words that weren't true, words that might protect her heart from the storm in his eyes, but none rose. Instead, she whispered, because I couldn't watch them break you. His jaw clenched. Pain flickered across his face, but not from wounds. From something deeper. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second, and she thought she saw gratitude lurking beneath his armor, but it vanished before she could be sure. The sound of footsteps shattered the moment. Low, steady, deliberate, mercenaries. Not the howls of wolves, but men, closing in through the forest with blades and torches. Their laughter carried, ugly and hungry. She stiffened, heart hammering. The Alpha tilted his head, listening, and for the first time she saw something flash across his expression, the feral readiness of a predator. They followed you, he murmured, voice rough with something she couldn't name. No, her denial was breathless. They followed us. Shadows slid through the trees, torchlight bleeding across the ruined walls. She panicked, reaching for him, whispering, "You can't fight like this. You'll die." His gaze snapped back to hers, and for an instant she thought he might agree. But then his lips curled, not in mirth but in the brutal memory of who he was. Better I die fighting than chained again. Before she could stop him, he rose. The motion tore at his wounds, blood soaking fresh into his torn tunic, but he moved with the raw strength of a wolf cornered. The storm lit him in flashes. Tall, defiant, terrible. The first mercenary crashed through the brush, blade raised. The Alpha didn't hesitate. His hand shot forward, catching the man's wrist, twisting until bone cracked. With a brutal shove, he drove the soldier into the stone wall. The man crumpled, lifeless. The girl froze, horror and awe tangled in her veins. He was no frail prisoner now. Even broken, he was savage. He was king. Another mercenary lunged, and this time the Alpha snarled, the sound half human, half beast. It rumbled through the ruins, shaking her to her core. He struck again, faster than pain should allow, driving the man into the mud with such force the earth seemed to tremble. She wanted to stop him, to tell him not to waste the strength he barely had, but her words caught in her throat. Because part of her, the part she feared most, was relieved. Relieved he could fight. Relieved he was not helpless. Relieved he was every bit the monster they said he was. She pressed her back to the crumbling wall, chest heaving, unable to look away. Rain plastered his hair to his face, blood streaked his skin, but his movements were merciless, precise. Brutal, yes, but also controlled, like a predator savoring the reminder of his own strength. The last mercenary hesitated, fear finally cracking through bravado. His eyes darted between the Alpha and the girl, then he turned to flee. The Alpha caught him before he could vanish into the trees. Dragged him back, pinned him against the stones, and leaned close enough for the man to feel his breath. His voice was low, dangerous. Tell them. Tell them the king is not dead. Tell them she is mine. Then he released him. The soldier stumbled away, terror driving his legs faster than reason. The alpha watched him vanish into the storm, then turned back to her. Her pulse raced, fear and something darker winding through her veins. She should have run. She should have turned her back. But when his gaze found hers, all she could do was hold it. He was still bleeding. Still trembling. But his presence was undeniable, fierce as thunder. "You see now," he said quietly, almost brokenly. "I am not safe. Not for you. Not for anyone. And yet you came." She swallowed hard, her voice fragile. "I don't know why." His eyes burned gold in the storm's fading light. "Then we are both cursed. Because I dreamed of you, and now here you are." The storm had slowed, but its echoes clung to the night like a lingering bruise across the sky. The ruined villa lay heavy with silence, its crumbling walls shivering under the weight of shadows. Inside, by the faint crackle of a dying fire, she sat beside him, her hands still stained with his blood, her heart heavier than the stone beneath her knees. The alpha's breath came shallow, yet steadier now, each rise and fall of his chest proof that life still clung to him despite fate's attempt to steal it away. But as the minutes bled into hours, her own silence grew sharper, cutting into her thoughts with the edge of old wounds. She had saved him, yes, but the question gnawed at her: what right did she have to fight for another's survival when she herself had been cast aside, deemed unworthy, left to rot under the eyes of those who once called her kin? The memory rose unbidden, as memories often do when the body is weak and the heart has no armor left to raise. She saw the flames again. Not the gentle warmth of hearthfire, but the searing blaze of the silver flame erupting from her own hands, the night she first revealed what she was. A gift, the elders had once whispered in half-forgotten tales. A curse, her pact declared when the light leapt free, bright enough to blind the blood moon overhead. She had been 16, trembling, terrified, and proud. For a breathless second, she thought it meant destiny. Instead, it meant exile. Her pack's voices had been merciless. Monster. Abomination. Witch fire. The words were spat like poison as they stripped her of name, of place, of belonging. And then, the cruelest cut of all, the one who had been promised to her by bond and by blood, the one who should have been her anchor under that cursed red moon, had stepped forward and rejected her. Not just turned away. Not just denied. He had looked into her eyes still burning silver from the flame, and severed the tether between them with cold, deliberate finality. Her heart still burned at the memory, not with anger but with that deeper ache, the kind that hollows a person and leaves them wandering. For years she had drifted, a shadow between villages, healing strangers with gifts she dared not name, offering hope to others while starving herself of it. And every night, when she closed her eyes, she begged the moon for one thing only: not love, not power, not vengeance. Belonging. The simple, impossible act of being seen and accepted as she was. And now here, beside her, lay the Alpha King. The man whose name carried both fear and reverence, the man torn down and broken, stripped of crown and pack alike. His story was not hers, yet as she studied the hard line of his jaw, the scar at his temple, the shadows under his eyes, she saw the echo. He too had been cut from his world, carved out by betrayal. He stirred, restless, his body caught between fever and memory. A low growl trembled in his throat, not at her, but at ghosts she could not see. His hand twitched against the ground, fingers curling as though reaching for a throne already stolen. She could almost feel his torment pouring from him, thick as the storm's humidity, heavy as the weight she bore herself. His kingdom of wolves betrayed. His bloodline cursed. His trust shattered into shards too sharp to ever piece back together. Two souls, torn from different worlds, yet scarred in the same places. She wondered, was it fate's cruelty that bound them here, or fate's mercy? The fire gave a soft hiss, as if answering. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, though the cold she felt was not in her skin but in her bones. Watching him, her breath caught at a truth she dared not voice. For all her years of wandering, of praying to the moon to belong, perhaps belonging had not been in the arms of her pack, nor in the promise of a rejected mate. Perhaps belonging had been waiting here, in the dark, in the ruins, beside a broken alpha who somehow already knew her name. And yet fear pressed at her ribs. Not fear of him, though his power radiated even in weakness. It was fear of herself. Fear of what it meant that she had risked everything, coins, safety, even her life, to save him. Fear of the silver flame within her, a secret that could damn them both if it burned too bright. Fear that for once she had stumbled into something greater than wandering, and she did not know if she was strong enough to hold it. The wolves howled again in the distance, their cries jagged, feral, too close to be ignored. She lifted her gaze to the shattered ceiling above, the stars veiled by storm clouds. Her heart thudded with the same rhythm it had the night she was cast out, fast, uneven, desperate. The night she had thought she lost everything. And perhaps she had. But here, in this ruin where time itself seemed to hold its breath, she began to wonder if she had only been waiting. Waiting for him. The forest had grown unnaturally still. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath as they moved beneath the canopy, the alpha leaning on her shoulder, his weight both anchor and burden. Every step pressed deeper into the wilderness, every breath carrying the metallic taste of destiny, though neither dared name it aloud. Then the trees broke open, and before them rose the ruin. An ancient temple, Roman in its bones, wolfish in its soul. Pillars leaned like weary guardians, cracked with age yet defiant against centuries of weather and war. Moss curled around stone carvings of wolves whose faces had been half swallowed by time, their once proud eyes now blind, yet somehow still watching. The air vibrated faintly, as though every bl. She froze, her chest tightening as her gaze fell on the murals etched along the walls. The fading paint still pulsed with a strange vitality, as if the earth itself bled color through stone. Figures danced in firelight, wolves circling beneath a burning moon, a crown shattered and reforged, a woman with silver flames pouring from her hands. Her heart lurched. It was her. Not in form, not in name, but in essence. The same wild light she had feared all her life blazed from the mural's figure, carving her into legend without her consent. The alpha's breath grew harsh beside her. His eyes, shadowed by fever yet sharpened by something deeper, fixed on the mural with a hunger she could not bear. His voice cracked the silence, rough and reverent all at once. The child of flame. The words hung heavy, reverberating against the pillars until even the air seemed to repeat them. She shook her head, stumbling back, shaking as though she could cast them off like chains. No. Don't. Don't call me that. But the temple itself refused her denial. A gust of wind slipped through broken arches, stirring the dust, curling around her fingers. And then her hand, her cursed hand, ignited. Not in pain, not in destruction, but in light. A silver glow shimmered at her fingertips, soft at first, then steady, a living echo of the fire painted centuries ago on the stone walls. Her throat closed. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't an accident. It was awakening. She pressed her glowing hand against him, against the wound that had nearly stolen his life. The flesh knit together faster than before, blood clotting, skin weaving back into itself as if obeying the mural, obeying the prophecy written long before either of them breathed. He hissed at the sensation, half pain, half relief, his muscles trembling beneath her touch. But he did not pull away. He leaned closer, as if daring fate to finish its work. Her pulse hammered, not from exhaustion, but from fear of herself. She had spent her life running from this very moment, this undeniable truth that the flame within her was not a curse to conceal but a power that demanded to be wielded. And yet, standing there with his blood drying beneath her hand, she wanted to scream. Not in triumph. In dread. Why me? The question was raw, breaking from her lips with a desperation that stripped her bare. Her voice shook, splintered, carrying years of exile, rejection, and longing. Why should it be me? The alpha lifted his head, his eyes burning into her with an intensity that silenced the forest. His voice, though ragged, carried a weight older than his years. Because the crown is broken. Because I am broken. And the prophecy speaks not of those who were whole, but of those shattered enough to rebuild. His words were not comfort. They were truth. And truth cut sharper than any blade. The murals seemed to stir at his declaration. The wolves painted on the walls gleamed faintly, their faded eyes alight with silver reflections. Somewhere deep in the forest, a chorus of howls answered, not one, but many. Dozens. 100, perhaps, though distance warped the number. The sound wove through the air like a thread pulled tight, binding the moment into something larger than choice, larger than defiance. Destiny pressed down, a hand on her shoulder, a weight in her chest, a fire in her blood. Heavy, undeniable, merciless. She wanted to run. She wanted to kneel. She wanted to be free of it, and yet some part of her, small, furious, and unyielding, wanted to rise into it, to claim it before it consumed her. Her hand still glowed, the silver flame refusing to dim. His wounds had closed, but the bond it forged between them did not fade. He was tethered to her now, not by coin, not by mercy, but by something older, carved into stone long before her birth. She saw it in his gaze. That same reluctant recognition, that same fear veined with hunger. They were no longer two exiles clinging to survival. They were the prophecy incarnate. And the night knew it. The silence did not last. It never does. Destiny always draws eyes, and theirs were not alone beneath the broken temple's shadow. The first growl rolled through the trees like a stone hurled down a cavern. Low, guttural, carried on more than wind. The alpha stiffened, shoulders coiling, gaze flicking toward the arches where darkness thickened unnaturally. She felt it too, the pressure, the tightening air, the way the forest seemed to fold in on itself. Not wolves alone. Something else. Something older. The glow on her hand sputtered, though it did not die, and in its light she caught the glint of steel. Figures stepped into the ruin, torches raised, faces hard, cloaks trimmed with wolf pelts, their insignias carved in the Roman way. Counselors of the old bloodline, men who claimed they had inherited the authority of emperors long gone. Behind them, shadows shifted into the unmistakable forms of rival alphas, their wolves restless, their eyes sharp with hunger for power. They had been waiting. Watching. And now, they had come to judge. The amphitheater, half buried, half standing, loomed just beyond the temple grounds. They forced her there, torches burning high, voices cutting the night with the precision of blades. The alpha stayed close, his strength returning enough that his presence radiated again like a storm contained within skin. But his hand lingered near hers, a tether of unspoken solidarity, though his eyes remained cautious, conflicted. They circled her, their words colder than the night air. Witch. Cursed flame. She brings ruin. Every accusation landed heavy, echoing against stone, against her chest, against the marrow of her bones. Her breath quickened, but she did not bow her head. She had lived too long beneath the weight of rejection to crumble now, though the familiar sting of exile clawed at her throat. One counselor stepped forward, draped in robes stitched with silver thread, voice carrying the arrogance of centuries. She meddles with powers forbidden since the fall of Rome. Did we not decree that no bearer of the flame should ever rise again? Did we not burn their names from our histories? The crowd's murmur rose like a tide. Wolves snarled low, snapping at chains, the amphitheater alive with fury and fear. The alpha spoke at last, his voice iron-wrapped, strained but unyielding. She is no witch. She is the reason I still breathe. Without her, I would have bled beneath your feet like carrion. A murmur of dissent, sharper than any blade, cut him down. His words did not silence them. They fueled them. A rival alpha barked across the circle, his chest bare, scars glowing pale in the torchlight. And what are you now? A king who hides behind an exile's flame? Do you think your throne can be restored with whispers of prophecy? You were bought, chained, broken in the auction square. Your blood is tainted. Your crown is ash. The words struck, and she felt the alpha falter beside her, not in body, but in spirit. His jaw tightened, his silence lengthened, his shoulders bore the weight of accusation heavier than chains. She turned toward him, heart racing, praying he would not bend. But doubt flickered in his eyes, and that doubt cut deeper than any blade. The first clash erupted not in words but in steel. A sword hissed through the air, catching torchlight as it arced toward her. She barely twisted aside, the blade carving the hem of her cloak, sparks flaring against stone. Wolves lunged, teeth flashing, claws raking stone, the amphitheater drowning in chaos. The alpha moved then, feral, unstoppable, his claws unsheathing, his growl shaking the pillars that still stood. He tore through the first line of attackers with a brutality that silenced the crowd for heartbeats. But even as he fought, his gaze flicked toward her, part command, part desperation. Stay. Hide. Survive. She fought too, though not as they did. Her flame burst free, silver arcs spilling from her palms, scorching the air, searing through chains meant to hold wolves at bay. Every strike sent pain tearing through her, as though the fire drew not from air, but from her very soul. She screamed with each release, not only from agony, but from the terror of revealing herself so fully, so completely, before eyes that had already marked her cursed. The council recoiled, some crossing themselves in the old Roman way, others jeering louder. See? She carries the fire that destroys. She will burn us all. The clash spiraled into frenzy. Blades clashed with claws, howls shattered against human cries, blood streaked the stones of the amphitheater like fresh paint on ancient walls. She caught glimpses of him, her alpha, fighting with the fury of one who had nothing left to lose, his body moving like storm and shadow. And yet, he hesitated. Not in his strikes, but in his stance toward her. His defense wavered between protecting her and shielding his claim. Her chest tore open with the realization, he was torn. Torn between her, the exile who had defied fate to save him, and them, the remnants of his kingdom, the pack whose loyalty he still sought. The enemy pressed harder, shadows multiplying. Wolves darker than night itself, eyes burning red, slithered from the corners of the ruin. Shadow wolves. Born of curses older than prophecy, creatures who thrived on chaos. Their howls pierced the night, rattling bone, shaking stone. Fear iced her spine. She had seen them once before, when she was a child. They had circled her pack's lands until fire drove them away. She had prayed never to face them again. Yet here they were, called by the scent of prophecy, drawn to the flame in her veins. The alpha roared, a sound both defiance and despair. He leapt into them, steel clashing against shadow, his strength staggering but not infinite. For every beast he cut down, two rose. She tried to reach him, tried to press her flame into the dark, but hands seized her wrists, human hands, council hands. They dragged her back, voices spitting venom. You will not damn us with your fire. You will not curse us again. Her scream tore through the night, raw, ragged, desperate. She thrashed, the flame sputtering, but exhaustion claimed her faster than fury. And in her final glance before the crowd swallowed her, she saw him. The alpha, blood streaking his chest, eyes locked on hers even as enemies closed around him. His lips moved, silent words carried on no breath, but she read them. Hide. Survive. Trust me. Then the world broke apart. She was dragged into shadow, ripped from the amphitheater, her body battered, her spirit burning with a fire that refused to die. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by the echo of her own heartbeat, the ache of separation cutting sharper than any wound. And he, her alpha, remained behind, standing before his pack, his council, his enemies, torn between the throne that demanded his loyalty and the woman fate had bound to his soul. The clash had ended, but not in victory. Not in union. It ended in separation, in silence, in the agony of knowing their bond had been tested by the world, and the world had forced them apart. The cave was hidden by thorn and stone, a hollow in the mountain's ribs where the moonlight slipped through cracks in the ceiling like silver threads. She stumbled inside first, her body bruised, her spirit raw from the amphitheater's chaos. He followed, slower, heavier, his steps unsteady, blood dripping in a rhythm that marked every inch of their exile. The world outside still raged, but here the air was damp, quiet, almost forgiving. She guided him down against the cold rock, her hands trembling as they brushed his skin. The fire within her wanted to blaze again, to heal him with silver light, but she held it back, terrified of what it might draw if she used it too freely. Instead she reached for strips of cloth torn from her own cloak, pressing them to his wounds, her fingers stained crimson. He did not flinch. Not once. His gaze lingered on her face, shadowed yet fierce, studying her as though he had waited a lifetime to memorize her features. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the drip of water from stalactites overhead. Finally, his voice, low and rough, slipped into that silence. "I was not always broken." Her hands stilled. His eyes unfocused, fixed somewhere past the stone walls, past her, into memory. "They were mine once, every wolf, every hell beneath the night sky. They swore to me beneath the blood moon, and I believed their loyalty was iron. But iron rusts. Chains snap. And betrayal always cuts from within." He drew a ragged breath, his chest shuddering beneath her touch. "They turned against me. Not strangers. Not enemies. My own counsel. My blood. I lost them to ambition, to fear, to greed. And when I fell alone." Her throat tightened. She pressed harder against the wound, but her trembling was no longer from exhaustion. It was from the weight of his confession, from the rawness in his voice. She understood it too well. The loneliness. The hollow ache of knowing betrayal is most lethal when it comes from those meant to protect. Her whisper barely rose above the cave strip. "I know that pain." His gaze snapped back to her, sharp, unblinking, piercing deeper than her defenses could withstand. "You do. I see it in you. You've carried exile like a brand across your skin, but you never let it kill you. You still fight. Even when the world calls you cursed." She wanted to deny it. To shrug it off. But the words sank into her like fire finding dry wood. Her breath hitched, and her hands stilled upon his chest, fingers splayed as though she could anchor herself against the storm he stirred inside her. For a heartbeat, there was no counsel, no prophecy, no shadow wolves waiting beyond the cave. Only the warmth of his body beneath her palms, the rise and fall of his breath, the way his eyes softened when the weight of his mask slipped. The space between them closed. Not in leaps, not in sudden hunger, but in inches, each one heavier than the last. His forehead brushed hers, his breath warm against her lips, carrying the copper tang of blood and the wild scent of wolf. Her body leaned forward before her mind could catch, drawn not by reason but by the gravity of something older than both of them. The almost kiss hung like a thread of silver flame, bright, fragile, inevitable. His whisper broke it, not shattering but deepening. Words quiet enough to feel rather than hear. "I see you, all of you." Her breath caught. He did not mean her face, nor the trembling hands, nor the exile's rags draped across her shoulders. He meant the flame. The curse. The power she had buried, feared, despised. He saw it and did not flinch. Did not recoil. He named it not as ruin, but as truth. She wanted to believe. Every fiber of her wanted to believe. That she was not cursed. That she was not unworthy. That she could be seen and still be wanted. Her lips parted, but the kiss never came. She drew back just enough, doubt stealing the final inch. The fire in her veins crackled, reminding her of prophecy, of the council's cries, of wolves circling in the dark. To surrender to him now would be to risk not only her heart, but everything tethered to it. Her hand slipped from his chest, falling to her lap. The moment fractured, delicate as glass. He studied her, his jaw tight, but he did not push closer. He let the silence stretch, let the choice remain hers. And still, the echo of his words lingered. "I see you." They carved themselves into her, leaving her trembling not from fear this time, but from the terrifying possibility that he spoke the truth. The drip of the stalactites filled the silence, each drop loud as a drumbeat, marking the fragile rhythm of what they almost shared, and what they might still. The council gathered beneath the fractured dome of the ruined amphitheater, torches burning low and casting jagged shadows along the cracked stone. The air smelled of rain-soaked ash and wolf musk, thick with tension sharpened by centuries of old grudges. She stood behind him at first, tucked into the narrow space where his shadow fell, her pulse thunderous in her ears. His presence had always been a shield, but tonight it felt thin, fragile, as if the world was waiting to pierce through it. The elders sat in a circle, cloaks heavy with the weight of lineage, their eyes colder than the steel rings carved into the amphitheater floor. Rival alphas lined the edges, silent yet predatory, their gazes fixed on her as though sensing blood before the first wound. She kept her hands folded before her, the tremor in her fingers hidden within her palms. One of the councilmen rose, his voice rasping like old parchment torn too many times. "We have heard whispers, seen shadows. But whispers are no longer enough. Show us the truth. Show us what you hide." Her chest constricted. She looked to him, the alpha, her alpha. His jaw was rigid, his eyes unreadable in the torchlight. A silent war raged in them, to protect her, or to protect the fragile threads of his claim upon these wolves. She wanted him to speak, to cut the accusation down before it could grow roots. He did not. The councilman's hand struck the floor with a staff carved of ironwood. A signal. A demand. Another voice rose, sharper. "The cursed flame has returned. The old fire that devours crowns and kingdoms. She carries it. She is the doom written in stone." And then it happened. The heat surged beneath her skin, unbidden, merciless. Her palm burned, not with pain but with inevitability. Silver light cracked along the lines of her hand, racing up her wrist like fire tracing veins. She gasped, clutching it, but the glow only grew, bright as moonlit steel, alive as lightning. The amphitheater erupted. Gasps. Growls. Shouts. Wolves staggered back, others pressed forward, their fear clothed as fury. The silver flame shimmered over her skin, undeniable, uncontainable, a brand that exposed her no matter how tightly she curled into herself. The council's leader rose, his face twisted into the mask of a victor who had awaited this moment. "Behold! Not healer, not savior. Destroyer. The flame that consumed Rome. The fire that will reduce Pax to ash. And you." He thrust a clawed finger toward the alpha. "You shelter her. You would make her your queen. You betray your blood for a curse." Her heart stuttered. All eyes turned to him. To the man whose touch had steadied her in the cave, whose voice had whispered "I see you" when no one else dared. She waited. One word. One denial. One roar of defiance that would cut through their venom. But he hesitated. The silence stretched, crueler than any blade. His throat worked, his fists clenched, but the words did not come. He looked at her, his eyes burning with conflict, but his voice stayed locked behind his teeth. The wound sliced deeper than claws. Deeper than fire. It was betrayal, not an act, but an absence. The absence of him standing beside her when the world turned. Her breath shattered. The flame within her answered, furious, unchained. Silver fire burst across the ground, searing cracks into stone, racing in spirals that split the amphitheater floor. Wolves stumbled back, howling, their eyes reflecting white light as if the moon itself had fallen into the pit. The council scrambled to their feet, shouts lost beneath the roar of her fire. She staggered, hands trembling as the flame scorched outward, sparks spinning into the night sky like shards of falling stars. Tears blurred her vision, but nothing dimmed the truth. He had not spoken. He had not chosen her. Her voice ripped from her throat, raw, breaking, yet fierce enough to echo across the ruins. "If I am curse, th." With one last surge, the silver flame erupted around her, a barrier of light that blinded their eyes and seared their senses. She turned, fleeing through the fracture she carved into the amphitheater wall. The night swallowed her, the forest trembling as the flame scorched her path. Behind her, the council's cries rang out. Betrayal. Witch. Doom. But louder still, the silence of the Alpha who did not defend her. The fire burned hotter with every step, her skin alive with power she could no longer cage. The trees recoiled as she passed, bark blackening, leaves curling to ash. The forest became her furnace, the night her witness. She did not look back. Could not. The wound in her chest was too wide, too deep, and the only thing that kept her moving was the knowledge that to stop now, to falter, to turn back, would be to let their chains close around her forever. The prophecy's words chased her, cruel and relentless. The child of flame shall summon 100 wolves. But now the prophecy tasted bitter, twisted, poisoned by their lies. She was alone. More alone than she had ever been. And yet, in the furnace of betrayal, a resolve began to form. If he would not stand for her, then she would stand for herself. The flame no longer asked. It demanded. And she would answer. The ruins stood silent, blackened bones of empire against a bruised horizon. Smoke clung to broken arches, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the cruelty to begin. Chains rattled at her wrists, their iron biting her skin, their weight dragging her toward the circle of sharpened stakes planted in the earth like teeth. Torches hissed in the hands of her enemies, the flames trembling in the wind, hungry for her body. They called it justice. They called it cleansing. She knew it for what it was, fear dressed as ritual. Fear of her power, fear of her defiance, fear of a woman who had refused to be their obedient sacrifice. Her knees struck the ground as they forced her forward. The earth was damp beneath her palms, cold, unyielding. The scent of blood and smoke filled her lungs, but beneath it all, she smelled rain, thick, heavy, waiting to fall. The world itself trembled, sensing what they did not, the moment was not theirs to command. A voice rose above the crowd, sharp as the crack of a whip. Burn the flame-bearer. Let her ash scatter with the wind. End her curse before dawn. Cheers erupted, snarls tearing from wolf throats, claws raking stone in anticipation. The stakes loomed before her, taller than men, their tips charred from centuries of executions past. She felt the heat of the torches, the hunger of their gaze, but inside her chest, the fire coiled. It was no longer a whisper, no longer a question. It was a demand. The first lash of rope dug into her skin, binding her arms to the wood. Splinters pressed against her back. Her heart thundered, not with fear, but with fury so sharp it steadied her breath. She closed her eyes. They thought she would beg. They thought she would scream. Instead, she remembered every moment that had led her here. The rejection under the blood moon. The exile carved into her name. The Alpha's silence when she needed his roar. The betrayal that had split her heart wide open. And in that wound, the flame was born. The torch touched the wood. Smoke curled, soft at first, then thicker, pressing against her skin, reaching greedy fingers toward her flesh. The crowd leaned in, eager to watch her body break. But the fire did not consume her. It bowed to her. Silver light exploded from her chest, racing down her arms, shattering the ropes into ash. The wood blackened, but not from the torches, her flame devoured it whole, swallowing it until nothing but molten dust scattered into the air. Gasps tore through the amphitheater. Wolves stumbled back, their eyes wide, their knees buckling beneath an instinct older than memory. The silver flame was no curse. It was dominion. The sky cracked open with thunder, lightning carving veins of white across the heavens. The ground split, trembling beneath the force of her power. Stones crumbled, pillars toppled, and still she stood, her body outlined in fire that burned without pain, fire that sang with the voices of every exile, every broken soul who had been cast aside. I am not your sacrifice. Her voice shook the night, deeper than any howl, sharper than any blade. I am not your curse. I am the flame you cannot chain. Wolves dropped to their knees, their heads bowed, their throats bared. The council staggered, their power dissolving beneath the weight of something they could not command. Even the rival alphas, men who had thirsted for her blood, lowered their gaze, unable to meet the brilliance of her aura. And then, through the storm, he came. The alpha pushed through the chaos, his body torn, his face bloodied, but his eyes fixed on her as if she were the only thing left in the world worth seeing. He did not stand above her this time. He did not hesitate. He dropped to one knee, head bowed, his voice low but unshakable. No crown without flame. No king without her fire. You are not curse. You are queen. For the first time, her heart did not break at his words. It blazed. She saw him, not as savior, not as betrayer, but as man, flawed, scarred, choosing at last to kneel not in fear but in recognition. The silver flame roared higher, wrapping them both in its light. Around them, wolves howled, 100 voices carried into the night, not in defiance, but in allegiance. The ruins of Rome fell silent. The old world of chains and fire was gone. In its place stood something reborn. She stepped forward, fire in her veins, storm at her back, no longer the outcast, no longer the rejected mate. She was the prophecy fulfilled. She was the silver flame. And the world would bow, not to fear, but to her. The battlefield was still smoking, the last sparks of her flame crackling against the shattered stones. Ash drifted like ghost snow, settling on fur and flesh, on broken spears and fallen banners. She stood at the center of it all, trembling, her chest heaving, her skin still glowing faint with silver fire. Around her, wolves knelt in silence. Some bowed their heads willingly, reverence carved into their posture. Others kept their eyes fixed on the ground, obedience driven more by fear than faith. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Was this allegiance, or was this terror? Was she their savior, or their doom? Her gaze swept across the kneeling crowd. Every pair of eyes that dared to meet hers reflected something different: hope, awe, dread, suspicion. She felt the weight of all of it pressing down, crushing her ribs, making her wonder if victory could taste this bitter. She had claimed her power, yes. But power alone was not love. Power could command bodies, but never hearts. The alpha stood beside her, bloodied but unbowed, his hand resting loosely at his side. His eyes held no fear, only recognition, only the acceptance she had craved since the moment he first entered her life. And yet, even his presence could not steady the storm inside her. She whispered, almost to herself, "Will they ever see me for who I am? Or only for what I burn?" Silence answered her. Silence, and the sound of her own heart racing in her chest. And so the question falls to you. If you had stood among those wolves, if her silver fire had lit the sky before your eyes, would you have chosen her? Would you have stepped forward in devotion, or would you have flinched back, fearing that her touch could scorch more than wood and stone? Is she the savior the prophecy promised, or is she the curse they warned against? The truth, perhaps, lies not in the flame itself but in what burns within you. If this story has set your heart racing, if her struggle has awakened something fierce and aching inside you, then do not let the fire end here. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where every tale burns with love, power, and fate, and where every choice, like hers, will leave you trembling on the edge of destiny. But this is not the end. Dawn breaks, slow and merciless, painting the ruins gold. The first light spills across her skin, and the flame within her flickers but does not fade. She lifts her head, and what she sees steals the breath from her lungs. 100 wolves. A full circle of them, standing at the edges of the clearing, their fur glinting in morning fire. Just as the prophecy had spoken, they had come. Not summoned by chains, not driven by fear, but drawn by destiny. And yet, even as the sight should have filled her with triumph, the air shifted. Cold, sharp, wrong. From the shadows beyond the ring of wolves, a voice rose. Low, venomous, certain. She is not the only one. The words slithered across the clearing, coiling around hearts already uncertain. Wolves stiffened, ears pricked, eyes darting into the tree-line. The alpha's jaw tightened, but he did not move, his gaze fixed on the darkness where the voice had come. The true alpha has yet to rise. The promise cut through the dawn like a blade, sharp and cruel. And then silence again. Silence, except for the faint echo of drums, steady, relentless, like a heartbeat. Wolves shifted uneasily. The morning light no longer felt warm. It felt like a warning. She closed her eyes. The prophecy was not finished. Her fire was not the final word. Somewhere in the shadows, another destiny stirred. The story was only just beginning. Fade to black. The howl of wolves. The steady thrum of a heartbeat, louder, louder, until it drowns all thought. Then silence.